if they show like if they play a Central or Naples, then I think if they ran over them, they could definitely sneak into the bottom of the national polls, or definitely kicking and scratching on the door. I just there just isn't enough quality wins on the resume, like quality, like big time wins. Especially with Atlantic not being as great as everyone thought. So it would be hard pressed for them to get much higher than the 20 to 30 range, low 20s, 30s, somewhere in there.
The main thing, the reason I was asking about that was when I look at the Geico Bowl thing, normally we usually have like the first one or two teams that get asked generally decline. I'm trying to figure out if Columbia could potentially be high enough where they might have an outside shot of getting that invite from Florida.
Yeah, Florida and Georgia seem to usually be kind of intertwined in that. So they would probably need some help from Lowndes. I mean, or whoever the 7A Georgia winner was, unless it's somebody that comes out of nowhere. But I think there would probably, you're obviously going to have the 7A winner that would likely be ahead of them, and then it depends what happens. I guess if South Dade ran the table and took out Deerfield Beach, I think they would probably be right there, 8A versus 6A, who knows? But I think a lot of it, if the 7A titleist declines, I think it would probably then go to Georgia 7A, and then possibly Georgia 6A, assuming that's like maybe Valdosta, just because there's so much fanfare up there, and then, maybe Columbia.
Well, in that case, they could always do Valdosta Columbia in the Geico Bowl series.
Yeah, they could. I think that they would probably, maybe if like a St. Francis didn't, they tend to do, the St. Francis, or if one of the, if they wanted to play again.
The one thing, though, I was told earlier in the year was St. Francis, they're not actually eligible for the Geico Bowl this year because they're not actually going to be a state champion like last year.
Oh, I hadn't heard that.
At least that's what I was told. I may be wrong, but that's what I was hearing from like recently.
Yeah, you might be right. I haven't really followed up on that. I think when it all comes down to it, they care about getting the biggest college players. I mean, that seems to be the formula for these ESPN games. Is it's not necessarily the teams as much as it's the college players attached to the teams. So I don't know. We'll see what happens. I love the concept of the Geico Bowl series. I loved it every year. I just thought last year was a little. I think they could have done a little bit better, but they did have a lot of teams pull out. So, it'll be interesting to see what happens with that this year. I do definitely love the concept.
Before I move into the last major game I charted down, which I know will have national title implications, I will also leave this one note that could be a good or a bad thing. The Valdosta quarterback and Columbia's quarterback both are committed to USF. So I guess if ESPN wanted something to talk about, they could definitely run with that.
Yeah, for sure. It'll be, like I said, it'll be interesting to see what happens. It definitely relies on the 7A champion saying no. The 7A in both Georgia and Florida saying no. So
the most likely ones to say no would probably be Lowndes and Lakeland.
Yeah, if Lakeland wins again, I wonder if they would turn it down twice. I would be shocked, especially because obviously they're always going to be a good team, but last year they were great, and this year I think they might be even better. So why, and I don't think they'll be as good next year as they are this year, with who they're losing. So maybe they'll look at it as a chance to show the world, but you never know.
I think that what I've been hearing mostly is like the coach at Lakeland just doesn't really see much value in like major national games.
Yeah, which is very unfortunate. But, like I said, there are the traditionalists that just want to stick to what high school football once was. I think it's a disservice to the kids, like to not play the best available, or, at least a couple against the best available. I mean, Lakeland is going to just have, a cakewalk of a season, more than likely until the end. And so why not test your players, get them ready for college.
Speaking of get two teams that are going to have a lot of college players, Week 10, Mater Dei versus St. John Bosco. This is obviously going to be probably the most hyped game of the season. I guess you could put St. Francis IMG as a close second, but Mater Dei St. John Bosco, obvious, like that's going to be the most hyped game across the board. And I'm going to take Mater Dei in this one.
Yeah, so going into the season, like I always say, I hate preseason rankings because we're just kind of guessing on which players matured the most, and who knows necessarily who's where, unless if you probably know the players that are on your team, but from a national standpoint, it would be impossible to keep up with all the transfers and so forth and so on. So, when I'm doing preseason, I just kind of look at a schedule and I'm like, well, what, could happen? And I actually had Mater Dei ranked lower than probably everybody going into the year, and it wasn't that I didn't think that they were good. I just thought that there was two for them. One was, they played St. Francis and then they played St. John's now, and obviously St. John's is not the team that everyone thought they were going to be going into the year, so that game ended up being pretty easy, and then the St. Francis game at home was very easy. And then there was this game at St. John Bosco, and I even brought it up. St. John Bosco has the revenge factor going for it. Obviously, they won the regular season last year, and then lost in the playoffs, and so that's why I think Mater Dei won the rematch in the playoffs last year. They had the revenge factor working for them, and then now this year, St. John Bosco has the revenge factor working for them. But if St. John Bosco isn't as good as we think they might be, which I mentioned earlier, I think the JSerra game will show, then maybe Mater Dei does actually run the table this year. I feel like, DJ is such a great quarterback. I would, but it's possible Mater Dei is just that good. I'm going to stick to my gun. I'm going to take Bosco in the regular season matchup, and then probably Mater Dei again in the playoff, and which is probably going to be, the rematch. So that's what I'm sticking with now, but I'm probably going to be wrong.
Well, we're also going to hit on one more topic before you head out. We were talking a little bit about our the rankings and stuff. I know you said you didn't really have your own Florida poll, but I guess we'll hit on your national poll. I believe you released it on yesterday.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mater Dei. Yeah. I'll just go through the list. Mater Dei at 1, Dugganville 2, St. John Bosco 3, IMG 4. St. Francis at 5, Lakeland at 6, St. Louis at 7, 8, St. Thomas Aquinas, Caddy, Texas at 9, North Shore at 10, Gonzaga at 11, DeMatha at 12, Lowndes at 13, 14 was St. Joseph Regional, Marietta at 15, St. Joseph Prep at 16, 17 Bishop Gorman, 18 St. John's, 19 De La Salle, 20 Allen, 21 Corner Canyon, Utah, 22 Longville, Texas, 23 Eastside Catholic, Washington, 24 Mentor, Ohio, and 25 South Lake Carroll out of Texas.
Yeah, I get a little bit of slack because a little bit of flack because I've kept a lot of these big teams like the St. John's of the world still ranked, even though they just piled up losses to this national schedule. I mean, their schedule is probably the toughest I've ever seen in high school football, and I just don't. I mean, even though they have the losses, I think at the end of the day, if you stack them up and they were to play against, like I have Mentor, for instance, out of Ohio. Like I think if St. John's played Mentor, I think that they would beat them. So that's why I rank them that way. Even though Minter's undefeated and St. John's has so many losses. So that's about that. Like I caught a lot of slack because I still had Marietta ranked after they lost to Grayson. I got chirped a lot because why didn't I have Grayson ranked and how could I still have Marietta ranked? And I said I just thought the game was kind of fluky. I thought Marietta, with their win over St. Joseph's, I thought that was a great win. St. Joseph's Prep, not regional, but and I didn't think Grayson was that good. Their other results just didn't match that result, and it wasn't like one of their other results didn't match that result. Like pretty much all of their other results didn't match that result. And so I was just like, there's obviously, I asked a couple people that I trust what they thought, and they kind of agreed, and that's the way, that's the way it was. But yeah, up top, like I said, I dropped Bosco 1 this week. Just because, like I said, they survived. Like it wasn't like they, were blowing them out and then they held on, which is kind of like what happened to Katy this week. They just kind of had a letdown at the end and the game looked kind of closer than it was. Like Bosco survived. Bosco had no business winning that game. If Servite had any resemblance of a kicker, they would have lost. So yeah, I just couldn't, do I think St. John Bosco is probably better than Duncanville? I guess, but I'm definitely not sure. I think Duncanville is really, really, really good. That state title game with North Shore last year was one of the best, if not the best, high school football games I've ever watched. And they have speed, they have everything, they have size, they have speed. I love the quarterback, and that was just a classic game, and that one really opened my eyes to those two teams.
I will say one thing that I noticed, like from the very start, with the poll, I think yours was the first like major like national poll that came out that actually had Lakeland over Aquinas to start the season. Like Aquinas, everyone else had probably anywhere from 1 to 5, and I was like, really? Lakeland is a better team than they were last year. At least from everybody I've talked to has felt that way. And there were still question marks heading the season with Aquinas. Why is everyone ranking Aquinas ahead of Lakeland?
Yeah, Aquinas, if you just look at star ratings and whatever, they'll trick you every single year. I've been tricked way too many times by them in the past. I like you said, Lakeland. That game wasn't. That wasn't even close to being close. That game was just a whooping. Now, I will say, like, I am a big proponent of that revenge game factor. So when they meet this year, well, assuming they meet this year in that 7-8 title game. Will I be shocked if St. Thomas Aquinas uses